Today, I am having a conversation with Aclesia Miller, who is a mindset coach and consultant. And we will be talking about how to stop negative thinking, how to stop negative thoughts, and self-care. Self-care. We'll be diving into how to deal with disappointments, how to deal with anxiety, and when you're feeling overwhelmed. And we will also talk about how to overcome limiting beliefs, as well as some mindsets that hold you back, and also how to break the power of shame. Hey, if we're just meeting for the first time, my name is Niyi Adereti, and I am so thankful that you're joining me live or watching the replay, whether it's on YouTube or listen to the audio podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And on this podcast, we like to have conversations around faith, around Christian spirituality, and around culture, and as well as how to live a successful life. So do me a favor, click the like button, subscribe on YouTube so you can get notifications about what we're doing every week. We upload every new videos on our YouTube every week, as well as new conversations every week. And also, hey, let me know, where are you watching from? Leave a comment in below and let me know where in the world you are watching from. By the way, hey, you can also check out my YouTube channel to find out more videos and other conversations I've had in the past. And also follow me on all the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm so excited about today's topic. I'm going to introduce my guest to you in a few minutes, but remember to click the like button and subscribe on YouTube. And let me know, where are you watching from? I'm always curious to know where people join us from live from different parts of the world. So leave a comment, let me know where you're watching from. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. So today I am having a conversation with Aclesia. Aclesia is a mindset coach and consultant, and our passion is to help people thrive and help them overcome limiting beliefs and overcome negative mindsets. And she has done an incredible job coaching people, and she has amazing e-courses. She has an e-course called Heal to Thrive. Heal to Thrive, and she also has another amazing e-course which is called Breaking Perfect, and you should check that out. If you look in the subscriptions, you will see links to resources by Aclesia, and I'm just excited to bring her on today to talk about this amazing topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Aclesia. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hey, Aclesia, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing so well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for jumping in today. And I am so excited about our conversation today. I think it's a very important topic that we should definitely talk about.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So, Ecclesia, before we jump in, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, especially your journey. I read your profile and you said something about this is like a personal journey to you, the journey of helping people overcome limiting beliefs and
Ab-
mindsets. And so tell me about that. Where did that come from?
yes. Huh. Well, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I grew up in an urban community. So it's mostly Black and Hispanic. And where I grew up, there was a lot of um, not necessarily poverty, but a lot of poverty thinking, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
mhm,
And emotional health wasn't really a thing,
mm,
and everyone was either explosive or shut down, you
mm,
know.
mhm,
And so from then on, I went to college when I was 18 years old. And between my time in college, which I was there for about 4 to 5 years, um, I got saved, I became a believer.
mm,
And then I realized soon after that not only did people who weren't believers struggle with emotional health and managing their inner worlds,
mm,
believers struggled with this just as much as people who didn't know God or didn't
mm,
believe in God.
mhm,
Um, and then I did a school of ministry here in Redding, California, where I live. Um, in that school of ministry, I began to really open up to emotional health, if that makes sense.
Mm,
And that really became my focus, was like, I actually want to be healthy and I want to be connected to God from the inside out, if
mm,
that makes sense.
mhm,
And I want the authentic version of myself. I want the
mm,
authentic version of who I know God made me to be.
mhm,
And in order to do that, I figured in my mind that I have to learn what it means to be me
mm,
100% of the time.
mhm,
And in what ways can I manage and change when I have grief, when I have disappointment, when I have pain? What do I do about that? How do I do that in a way that is authentic, but at the same time, it's not, I don't get stuck, because I think for so long I'd seen people get stuck in their emotions.
mm,
So, they have a moment where it could be a traumatic moment, or it could just be a moment where pain and anger just comes out of them. And then 5 years later, they're still bitter about the same thing.
mm, mhm,
And so, and then sometimes it was spiritualized,
mm, mhm,
sometimes it was a spiritual person, if that makes sense.
mhm,
And they had spiritualized their criticism of others, or they'd
mm,
spiritualized their own negative beliefs about themselves.
mm,
And so all of those things that I've seen over my life have led me to this point where I am very passionate about people being, one, authentically themselves, but two, people knowing and having the skills to process their feelings, thoughts, emotions in a way that it doesn't trip them up,
mm,
and it actually empowers them to be healthy and whole, because healthy isn't the lack of negative emotions. Healthy is the ability to process them in a good way, in a
mm,
way that doesn't trip you up. So, yeah.
wow. I love what you just said. Healthy is not about say that one more time because I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that's so
yeah.
good.
Healthy is not about not having negative emotions. Healthy is about knowing how to deal with your negative emotions.
Mm.
Hmm.
Knowing how to deal with your negative emotions. Now let's jump into that a little bit. I mean, if we look at 2020, for example, I mean, 2020 has been an awesome, incredible, but also painful year. So many things
Yeah.
has happened in just one year. We've lost incredible people this year. There's been
Hmm.
COVID, the pandemic, the shelter in place, shutdown. There was some riots, protests, racial stuff happening, elections, so many drama from church to culture to everywhere. And
True.
my doing my day job is being a pastor, and so I get to talk to people on the phone a lot. And one thing I noticed quite a lot in this season is people just processing what they are thinking and confused because either somebody was getting divorced and not understanding. I've been married to this guy for like 10, 20 years, and suddenly things just went down, and you could feel like they're almost thinking, did I do something wrong? Is it, am I not pleasing God? Maybe I'm not praying enough. So it's like I noticed this pattern of people's thought process has really been affected negatively. I don't know if it's 2020 or maybe it's just 2020 just highlighted the problem just because suddenly we are confronted with situations that what if you've been running away from yourself, suddenly you have to confront yourself because there's nowhere
Right.
to run, literally nowhere to run. So what do you think is what do you think is the root of negative thinking? Do you think it's spiritual? Do you think it's physical? I just want to know from your thoughts, what do you think negative thinking comes from?
That's a really good question. I think it comes from our experiences.
Mm,
So, um, I would say if you watch CNN or Fox News or any news outlet all day,
mm,
I would not be surprised if you struggle with a ton of negative thinking,
mm,
or sadness or anxiety or depression because of what you're putting inside of yourself.
mm,
So, I mean, what you eat must come out, right?
mm,
So that
mhm,
that happens in the physical sense, but it also happens mentally. So what you put inside of your brain is going to bear fruit inside of you or outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that. I would also say DNA. We are learning that DNA has a lot to do with how people think. They found studies that show that if your mother struggled with depression, she could possibly pass on the DNA that even the pain or whatever traumas she had, they can pass along to her child. And so this is even one of the reasons why I preach, like, work on yourself, work on your healing, because you don't want to pass. Like, if you could do anything about it, you don't want to pass along trauma to your child before they even are, able to walk or talk. And so, yeah, I think the key thing is with negative thinking, we have to stop being so judgmental up towards ourselves about it. I think most of our negative thinking about ourselves is partnered with judgment. So when we're confused, we judge ourselves for being confused. And when we're angry, we judge ourselves for being angry, or put any negative emotion there that you want. And it usually comes with this judgment that we have toward ourselves, that then the judgment is what wraps us up more than the feeling itself, if that makes sense. So I would just say that we need to allow ourselves. Confusion is normal. Especially in 2020. Like, if you're not confused, then I don't know if you're human. We're all in a space where we're not sure what's going on. But what if we stop saying, well, I should know, or we stop having this hardness towards ourselves because we're confused, and we say, you know what, I'm confused and it's okay. Or I'm upset, when the riots were happening, when George Floyd passed away, if you weren't angry, then perhaps you didn't see it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should have been angry. And God himself has the full range of emotion. He's not just a robot, up there without emotion. Emotion is good and normal, good and bad, so.
Wow. So many things you said that I want to come back to, but I loved you when you said about stop being judgmental about yourself, just because it's been a confusing year for everyone, and that's okay, because 2020 has been confusing. 1 minute we're locked down, next minute we're coming out, and then next second we're going back to lockdown.
Right.
It's so crazy. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about God as a range of emotions. But
Yeah.
one thing that really stuck with me was the DNA thing. How do we? I guess the first thing would be, how do you even know that you have trauma? Because I guess the first step would be to recognize that you yourself are traumatized. You're going through stuff, and then once you recognize that, then you can actually take the next step of figuring out, so how do I not pass this on to my kids or my children's children? So, what do you think are some keys that can help somebody know, hey, I feel like there's some trauma in my life I have not dealt with, or I feel like I have a problem with the way I'm thinking. I'm just bombarded with negative thoughts. What are some things that would help somebody know
Yeah.
that's going on? Yeah.
That's really good. I think there's so many ways, but I would say if you suspect it, probably. If you suspect that, which most of us know before we are willing to acknowledge that we know what's going on with ourselves. So I would say most of us are the experts at ourselves. We just won't give ourselves that position, if you will. So if I ask you, do you think you have some trauma right now? And you say, you know what, I think I do, I'm just not 100% sure where it is. That's a great place to start. Because that means you're actually admitting, like, you know what, I have some behavior. And the way to really check on trauma is look at your behavior. Are you angry? Are you explosive? Are you shut down? Are you dissociated, meaning you float away from your body? You're not really present in the moment. You're not grounded.
Mm,
These are all signs of traumatic experiences. Um, and often these are coping mechanisms that we do when that trauma gets triggered in
mm.
us, if that
Wow.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for me, I've had some traumas around being forced. I have this, like, this is a huge trigger in my life. If I
Mm,
feel like I'm being forced to do something, I
mm,
will escape the situation. So
mm,
I'll either do that on my phone, like I'm checked out, like you're
mm,
not going to get me, even though I feel like I have to be here,
mm,
or um, I will just escape by leaving, like actually leaving.
mm,
So, with that being said, go on your own journey of discovering that. And I would
mm,
also say most of us, if you're under the sound of my voice, have something to work through
mm,
because you've been around humans.
mm,
Okay. If you were raised by humans like I was, then more than likely there's something
mm,
that
mhm,
you could look at. You know, if you look at your marriage, what's happening there?
mm,
Are you showing up fully, or is there a place where you wanted to show up in your marriage, but something is not allowing you to? There's something to look at.
mm,
What's happening at work? I remember I realized with my own therapist, which
mm,
I recommend, get a therapist.
mm,
With my own therapist, I recognized that this issue of being forced was at the root of my work life. That I
mm.
didn't know how to work without pressure. I didn't
Wow.
know how to work because I felt like in order to get things done, I have to put pressure. And I'm still working through that now
Mm,
as an entrepreneur.
mm,
How do I work without the pressure of someone's, hand
mm,
saying, you better produce, if that
mhm,
makes sense?
mhm,
So it's so important. Like I'm exposing my own because I have no shame about the fact that I'm human and I'm
mhm,
working on it.
mhm,
I'm
mhm.
growing, I'm learning, I'm figuring it out.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what I'd say. Just probably you have something.
Mm.
You just want to actually take the time to look at it.
So good. So good. And I mean, it's like I think of myself as a husband and a dad, and thinking to when I first, before you get married, you're just living by yourself, doing your own thing, and then you marry someone, and then suddenly your weaknesses kind of start to creep up. And I remember maybe first, I would say maybe the first year of my marriage, I kind of refused to admit I had some issues. I just like whatever. My wife's just been dramatic. Um, but when she kept kind of bringing up the same things over and over, I had to actually force myself to think through. Hey, is this possible that these are patterns that has been part of my life for a long time, but I just never paid
Mhm.
attention to them. But somebody else is seeing them and trying to point them out because she's trying to tell me, hey, you need to do something about this, this, this. And the
Mhm.
same thing happens when I started having kids. I have three kids now, and I just noticed, especially when I had my first child, and I noticed some patterns and some behaviors in myself. I'm like, oh wow, okay, I guess I have some stuff I haven't dealt with that I need to deal with. It's so real. It's so real what you say. Like we all have to actually just confront ourselves and be honest with
Yep,
ourselves. Like everybody has stuff. Everybody has some sort of trauma that
absolutely.
if you don't sit down to either find a therapist or find somebody to talk through about it. It's gonna creep up at some point, whether you like it or not, and
Absolutely.
hopefully, you're ready for when it eventually creeps up. So good. Um, I wanted to ask you a question about anxiety. Um,
Mm,
Now, if 2020 has done anything to any of us, I would say probably the anxiety level of a lot of people has really gone high. Either it's
yeah,
because of single moms who maybe have to homeschool their kids and figure out how to work, or even parents trying to homeschool their kids and doing work or working from home or losing their job or etc. Filling the gap.
right.
So I feel like there's a connection between anxiety and negative thinking. I don't know, but I feel like there's a connection between your level of how anxious you are and what you are thinking through. But I guess my question would be, um, how do you deal with just the anxiety of 2020? even though it's I mean it's obviously getting to a close. But
Mhm.
what are some practical tips for somebody who's just dealing with high level of anxiety? What can they
Yeah.
do to process through that?
Yeah, practically for me, what I'm doing is, I mean, this may be a bit dark, but I have this saying, if the worst happens, I'll be okay.
Hmm.
And I have internalized that. And sometimes it pops up, feelings pop up, and I'm like, if the worst happens, I'm gonna be okay.
Hmm.
And I have to really anchor myself in that truth. And the foundation of that truth for me is God is going to always be good to me.
Hmm.
So the world falls tomorrow, God is going to always be good to me, and
Hmm.
I'm going to be okay.
Hmm.
Whether if the world falls on top of me and I go home to be with Jesus, God's
Hmm.
being good to me and I'm okay,
Hmm.
or I survive it and he provides bread for the next day. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
so oftentimes we have these worst case scenarios in our minds. Working with my clients, I've really noticed this. People create in their minds these stories,
Hmm.
things that haven't happened, things that might happen, but
Hmm.
if they do happen, then the worst could happen, all of these things. But oftentimes, once they say those stories out loud, those stories sound as ridiculous as they are.
Hmm.
So, many people believe like the world's going to fall because this person's the president or this person is the president or whatever it is. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, let's actually explore that.
Hmm.
If this happens and this happens and this happens, all these
Hmm.
things that you fear happening, what
Hmm.
what will happen to you?
Hmm.
Well, um, I don't know. Well,
Hmm.
exactly. Like,
Hmm.
it's not as big of a deal as we make them because it hasn't actually happened.
Hmm.
That the anxiety inducing feelings, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, and if it does happen, I think maybe 10 years we would have said, well, man, what if a pandemic happens?
Hmm.
Well, we're living through it,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and we're all alive, we're breathing, praise God.
Hmm.
We've lost people, but we're still going.
Hmm.
We're still breathing. So this is how I talk myself off the ledge when I
Hmm.
start to think, well, what ifs, and I start to feel anxiety.
Hmm.
Then I just talk myself down by saying, okay, if it does happen, then what's gonna happen? Oh, I'll
Hmm.
be okay.
Hmm.
So that's kind of my practical tool that I like to give away to my clients. Is
That's
like,
so good.
it's gonna be okay. No matter what happens, you're gonna survive. It'll be
Hmm.
fine.
Wow, so good. It's almost like
Mhm.
training yourself how to think, like developing this mindset of when when I'm confronted with situations that are outside of my control or just life, it's like I train my mind that my first reaction is I'm going to think positive. I'm going to know
Yes,
that I'm just going to believe that the outcome is going to be good no matter what, even though I don't
exactly.
know, even though I don't know exactly how to get to that good outcome yet, but I just have to
Mhm.
believe that God is good and somehow I'm going to be okay. And
Mhm.
I mean, I guess for me or for you, it might sound easy, but the truth is, it's probably been years of training yourself to respond like this. I've spoken
Practice.
to people, yeah, I've spoken to people who it's almost like it's difficult for them to get to that point to actually imagine that good is going to happen.
Mm,
Even those who believe in God and have faith sometimes struggle with actually believing that there's going to be a positive outcome. How do you train yourself to get to that
hmm.
point where your first reaction when you're confronted with negative situations or just anxiety or things like that is to just
Yeah.
remind yourself it's going to be okay?
The truth is, no matter how much I've trained, there still comes something big that just
Mm,
knocks me off the
mm.
off of all my training.
Mhm,
And so you made a good point. Like, it can sound easy, but there are times when, something happens and you just didn't expect it and you just weren't ready for it and it
Mm,
just knocks you off.
mm,
For me, my response has been to, in those moments where it's like, it's real and I'm
mm,
like in tears and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I usually have to go to God. Like I'm
mm,
literally running like to the Lord to journal.
mm,
This is a way that I really process
mm,
because my emotions sometimes can get so overwhelming
mm,
that I need paper and pen in order to get it out,
mm.
if that
It's
makes
good.
sense, because
Mhm,
I can't, my brain is too foggy that I can't
mm,
actually just do it in my brain.
mm,
Like, when I hear small things happening that are
mm,
anxiety inducing,
mhm,
then I'm more equipped to do that. But when something big comes in and I'm just flooded, I have to just get by myself, me and the Lord, and I have to process. And
mm.
I have to say, and I have to tell my heart what to do, because those are the
Good.
moments where it gets real.
Mm,
And those are the moments where I have to say, well, I know one thing for sure. I can't allow this emotion, because an emotion is not something to lead my life. So
mm,
that means I have to put it in its place, if that
mm,
makes sense.
mhm,
So that's why I go to my journal, and then I'm there to write out all of my feelings with all honesty.
mm, mhm,
I'm scared because this and this and this, and I feel like, what if this happens, then da, 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 da. I'm writing all of that out. And I never leave my journal without, or I won't say never, I try not to leave my journal without hearing what God has to say back to me.
mm,
And this is where I always find the peace
mm,
that I need to push anxiety out, and that's in the voice of God.
mm,
So when I'm writing, I'm literally, that second part of my journaling is his voice. What does he have to say? And I oftentimes will just sit there and meditate on his face, like looking at, okay, are you nervous, God? This is
mm.
another really practical thing I do, is I
Mm,
say, okay, God, are you nervous? And then I look for his face, and just in my imagination what the
mm,
what the Father looks like. And I'm like, let me see your face. Because
mm,
if you're nervous, then I should be nervous, right?
mm, mhm.
But if you're not nervous, and if I see his face and it's full of confidence, then I take on his confidence, and I just
Wow.
stay there until I can feel the confidence of the Father over that situation.
Wow.
So that's the intense,
Mm,
I'm knocked off my normal
mm.
times.
That is so good. I love that. Like just journaling and then waiting to
Yeah.
actually hear his voice. I love that practical thing you said. Actually asking him, "Are you nervous?" And kind of waiting
Mhm.
for him to respond to you, because that's where peace comes from. Peace comes from the voice of God. I think that's a really
Absolutely.
practical step. I want to go to a question that my cousin actually asked. I was like, this is a really good question. So he says, question for you: what strategies do you use to help somebody who has attempted suicide previously and they are having repeated suicidal thoughts? That's a really good question. What do you think? What are
Wow.
some practical ways to help somebody struggling with this?
Yeah. One, as the person who, if they're having suicidal thoughts,
Mm,
you first want to lower the stakes in your mind of suicidal thoughts, if
mm,
that makes sense, because you
mm-hmm,
don't want to go into it with anxiety.
mm,
Because I think the first thing is, you're like, I have to save their lives. I'm like,
mm,
you know what I mean? It can
mm-hmm,
become really high stakes.
mm,
And you want to see it through the lens of the Father. And God
mm,
is calm. you
mm.
know,
So
He's
good.
really calm about suicidal thoughts. He's not afraid of them.
Mm,
And so I would recommend first tapping into that, like, truthfully, that person, there's the risk, but ultimately it's not your job to save them.
mm,
You really have to trust in that and believe in that. It's not your job to save them, though God has sent you as a partner or a guide, a friend, and you want to take that role that God has allowed you to be in. Now, if it's a family member, that gets more cloudy.
Mm, mhm,
But if it's just someone, and then I would say, honestly, I would simplify it, and
mm,
I would just figure out how can I become their friend?
mm,
How can I just befriend them? Um, and not make them a project, because
mm,
people can feel that, and that can often push them even further, the
mm,
feelings of like I'm a project or I need to be fixed. And it's like, actually, I would begin to love them in such a way, like loving them. Love does a multitude, covers a multitude of sin, the Bible
mm,
says.
mhm,
So it's like when you just love a person, and love doesn't mean um I need to do something with you.
mm,
Love means acceptance and
mm,
choice.
mhm,
It's right. I come to you and I accept you as you are, and
mm,
I choose you,
mm,
you know? So I would just, using those simple tools, I just talk to them like a normal person, like, hey, like, what's going on? Or figuring out, hey, what would you think about going to a counselor? Like, I know someone who, or I either research or find some resources for them,
mm,
because also oftentimes with suicidal thoughts, especially perpetual suicidal thoughts, they
mm,
need somebody better than you,
mm,
meaning they
mhm,
need some professional help.
mhm,
So don't pretend to be a professional at something you're not a professional at.
mhm, mhm,
um, if they're getting professional help, then now they need love. They just need
mm,
someone to say, I'm with you,
mm,
I'm not going to leave you. Because oftentimes when people are suicidal, it's uncomfortable to be their friend,
mm.
right? We get a bit
So
nervous to
true.
be those people's
Mhm,
friends,
mhm,
because we're like, it puts our heart in a space and we're actually triggered, right? We're
mhm,
triggered
mhm,
because the potential of the loss, or the potential of what they could do to themselves, could then cause pain to us. But we
mm,
have to really rise above that and say, you know what? Love is always worth the risk.
mm,
Take the risk of loving them as a friend, get over your own trigger, and be there for them,
mm,
whatever that looks like. It's hard to say specifically, it just depends on the relationship.
mm.
But yeah, that's what I would say.
That is so good. So true. I love the points I've picked out. Be a friend, love them, um love and acceptance. I also love that you raised up the professional help. Sometimes
Yes.
things just get to a point where you just have to be honest with yourself. Okay, I can't help you
Hmm.
with the professional help you need. I can be a friend, I can
Right.
be a place of safety, but I cannot actually work. This is beyond my capacity. So I'm
Right.
gonna let's go find someone that can actually who has experience dealing with this that can help you. And I can just be your friend. I can just be the one who says, hey, let's go for a walk, or let's go get lunch, or let's just because sometimes people who struggle with suicidal thoughts
Hmm.
there's part of that is also isolation. They're so isolated, and sometimes they intentionally cut people off because they feel like they're not good enough to be around people.
Yep.
And so, but
True.
you have to like be intentional about, hey, I'm here for you no matter. Even when you push me away, even when you tell me to go, I am not going. I'm gonna be with you. I'm in the trenches with you. We're gonna walk through this together. I'm gonna be your friend. I'm going to love you. If I have to buy you groceries, if I have to help you shop, I will do anything
Mm.
practically I can to let you know that you have a friend, and then we will
So good.
trust the professional to help you walk through the professional side. That is so awesome. Um,
Hmm.
Cool. I mean, he asked another that question. I thought this was really good. And the question centered around just a professing Christian or a Christian who is kind of dealing with negativity or pessimism. How do you reconcile that in contrast to the promises that God has for us? I guess it feels like a two-in-one question. First
Hmm.
part for me is it actually possible for a Christian, for a believer to struggle with negativity and pessimism? If yes, how do you reconcile that with the fact that God's we have all these promises from God that God is good and He's faithful?
Hmm.
How do you connect the two
Hmm.
polarizing opposites?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Christians have negative thoughts as much as anyone who's not a Christian,
mm,
if not more, because
mm,
Christians can often struggle with judgment,
mm,
um, because of religion, if that makes
mm,
sense. It can
mhm,
cause us to be a lot more judgmental than other people.
mm,
Um, and so, yes, I think absolutely that's a thing. Now, how do we reconcile that? I think that's the journey.
mm,
We have to unlearn. We're going backwards. We're getting younger. We're letting go of um, belief systems that are
mm,
not like God.
mm,
And that's the journey we're all on as believers. And I think that takes time, that takes practice, that takes the presence, that takes
mm,
encountering. I find that when I encounter God, my mindset changes.
mm,
He
mhm,
actually elevates my thinking.
mm,
So, like the other day, I was on a walk, and I've been struggling with carpal tunnel in my hands, and
mm,
I just have been like, God, like, come on, this is like the most annoying
mm,
like thing. And so I'm on my walk, and I was listening to a book, and the girl said it's not a religious book.
mm,
It's more like a self-help type book. And
mm,
she said one line about gratefulness, and it just unlocked something in me. And
mm,
I just started, as I was walking, I just started to say, thank you, God. Thank you for my hands.
mm,
Thank you for my body. Thank you for everything you've given me.
mm,
Thank you for my little apartment. Thank you for this city. Thank you for, and it unlocked this where I could feel the presence of God saying, "No, I've been guiding you, and
mm,
nothing that I do for you or in you is on accident.
mm,
Everything, I have a purpose, and I'm working it for your good." And it was like that truth just like hit me, and I was
mm.
like, "Oh, thank you, God." So, with that being said, that's why we walk with God,
Mm,
so that so that He can take us from glory to glory, so that He can transform our thinking, so that we can actually um, become like Jesus.
mm,
It
mhm,
takes, Jesus doesn't just show up in us in a day.
mm.
You know, we must work out our own salvation. We must actually engage with the love of the Father and watch that transform and change us.
That is so good, Aclesia. Um,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about your two e-courses. Um, Before that, there was a question that popped in my head that I wanted to hear your thoughts about. And it's really about disappointment and feeling overwhelmed. Um, I mean, it's been an overwhelming year, and it's been a year of disappointment for different people at different levels. I mean, a lot of us came into 2020 with plans of things that we wanted
Mhm.
to do and goals and
Absolutely.
aspirations, and then boom, things kind of shook off, and some of us had to let go of some plans of how we thought things were going to be, or some people
Mhm.
will let go of their jobs, or some people are just struggling financially, especially people in business, self-employed people, and all that. And we're getting to the end of 2020 gradually, and we're looking into 2021. And
Right.
so I guess my question would be, how do we mentally prepare for the new year? Especially we're coming out of
Mm.
1 year with so much disappointment. It could be politics disappointment. It could be just whatever. And we're going into a
Mhm.
new year, and there's almost that risk of, should I actually have goals? What if 2021 comes with its own wrecking ball and just wrecks
Mm.
everything? How do we mentally
Yes.
prepare for 2021, knowing that we've had disappointments and so many things
Mhm.
that's happened in this year? What are your thoughts?
For me, um, I would say shift your perspective about what 2020 was.
Mm,
So even if it's been disappointing, um, God gave me this phrase maybe a year or two ago, and He said, disappointment isn't real. And I was like, God, what do you mean?
mm,
And He
wow.
said, ultimately, you will never be disappointed.
Mm,
when it's all said and done, it'll never happen. You'll actually, if you live in disappointment, it'll be a waste of your time.
Hmm.
It's like, wow, like,
Hmm.
thank God for knowing Jesus,
Hmm.
And so what that means to me is I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it his way if I'm
Hmm.
stuck in disappointment. It's okay.
Hmm.
Like disappointment, again, don't judge yourself for feeling disappointed. Like
Hmm.
it's disappointing when you expect something and it doesn't work.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that. But when you get stuck in disappointment, you then can't dream,
Hmm.
right? You then
Hmm.
can't look towards 2021 because you're still afraid of what 2021 could be.
Hmm.
And so I would say, what if you looked at 2020 and you said, okay, this was disappointing, but God, what were you doing there?
Hmm.
What did I miss? What were you teaching me? Because sometimes, we're so attached to the outcome, but God really cares very little about outcomes.
Hmm.
He cares about the journey, right?
Hmm.
He
So
cares
good.
about
Yep.
what it taught you more than about you getting the thing.
Hmm.
So I would just put on a different pair of glasses and I would look at it and then I would actually surrender.
Hmm.
And the way to surrender to disappoint in the area of disappointment, I think surrender looks like gratefulness
Hmm. That's good.
and thankfulness. And so I would say I would look at 2020 and I would find every way possible to be thankful.
Hmm.
Because if you're still breathing, that's you have a whole lot to be thankful for.
Hmm.
If your lungs are still working,
Hmm.
if you have a roof over your head,
Hmm.
if you have people that you love and that love you back,
Hmm.
even if it's just one,
Hmm.
even if the only person that loves you is you, like you 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 have something to be thankful for.
Hmm.
If you ate today, you have something to be thankful for. So I
So
would
good.
look over that year and I would really pull on that.
Hmm.
And then I would say, God, what do you have for me in 2021? What do you want me to believe? What's possible?
Hmm.
And we know that what's possible for with God is anything,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
And so maybe it looks like taking some of the things that you were expecting in 2020 and seeing like, God, are these things for 2021?
Hmm.
You know?
Hmm.
It's okay that um I think something that's a key is, especially for those of us who believe in the voice of God and in the prophetic,
Hmm.
it's okay if you heard wrong
Hmm.
in 2020.
Hmm.
Because I mean, there were a lot of people who thought 2020 was gonna look like some of the best prophets out there thought 2020 was gonna have this or do this.
Hmm.
And it's like, it's okay that maybe you were wrong.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
What if it's for another time? What if
Hmm.
God was speaking, but then maybe your excitement gotten in the way of what the
Hmm.
actual thing you were hearing?
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And if so, that's okay. You're
Wow.
human. You're not the voice of God itself. You're a
Hmm.
vessel.
Hmm. So
And
good.
every vessel only gets part.
Hmm.
We only
True.
get a piece. We don't
Hmm.
actually get the full picture. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
That's so good, Aclesia. I love that. I love the constant theme of gratitude,
Mhm.
and I love that you gave people permission to, hey, yeah, stuff, things didn't happen the
Mhm.
way you thought it would, and that's okay. It's like just that mindset of it's gonna be okay. It's kind of like that song. What's his name? Amanda Cook and um, I forgot his name now. The guy from
Stephanie, I think.
the
Oh,
one
it's a
that goes,
guy.
"It's gonna be all right, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right."
Dante.
Yeah, Dante and Ecclesia. I said Ecclesia. Maybe you're going to sing a song. Just joking. Dante and Amanda Cook, and I love that song. Simple song, but it's like that's a mindset that we actually need to have as we go into a new year and even for the rest of our
Mhm.
lives. Hey, whatever happens, it's
Yep,
gonna be all right. It's just somehow I
absolutely.
believe that things are going to work out for my good. I don't know how,
Absolutely.
but the people who thrive in the midst of adversity are usually the people who have just made up their mind to not give up and to just stay
Right.
focused. And I'm going to be grateful for what I have, and I'm always going to expect that thing to always work out fine. It's such a
Mhm.
powerful mindset to have. I love that. Awesome. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just some of your courses. This is Ecclesia's profile on Instagram. Please go follow her. She is incredible. She's always posting some really amazing content. And she's also, I forgot to mention, she's a co-host of the Love and Race podcast with her husband, John. Big John. Shout out.
Yes.
Um, but I really love, you have two e-courses that really stood out to me. The Heal to Thrive and Breaking Perfect. Let's start with
Mhm.
this one. Tell us a little bit about where this
Mm.
comes from and what is it all about? What is Heal to Thrive?
Yeah, so Heal to Thrive is actually a coaching program. And essentially, it's a 4 session. You get 4 sessions in 1 month, and we
Mm,
really go after healing, inner healing.
mm,
And then we also have a session that's just set apart for thriving. Like, what
mm,
does it look like for you to thrive in this specific area?
mhm,
And so, yeah, that's essentially what it is. It's birthed out of this desire for me to see people not just heal, if that makes sense, but also
mm,
to thrive. Because I think that if you're on the journey of healing, you're already thriving.
mm,
Now you just actually need to get a system in place or a plan in place for what heal to thrive, what your healing and thriving can look like on a
mm,
practical sense. So,
mm.
yeah.
I love that. I love that. And and then you have this one also called Breaking Perfect, and I think it talks a little bit about
Yes.
perfectionism and all that. But walk us through what this is about.
Yeah, so Breaking Perfect is a 3-part course. It's We focus on breaking up with judgment, making peace with the process, and
Mm,
loving your humanity.
mhm,
And those three sessions are for me a concoction to help people break out of perfectionism and religion. So I think that religion is the spiritualized perfection.
mm.
And
Wow.
so yeah, and so I want to help people break out of that because perfectionism and religion crushes dreams, it crushes self-worth, it crushes joy. And so these are things that we're made for. And so that course was made to help people break out of that. And then with each session, each person gets a healing guide, which is
Mm,
just like a journaling. It's basically a journaling guide so that they can process the information a little bit better.
mm.
And yeah, that's it.
So good. Such powerful content. And oh, by the way, there's a link in the description where you can find a link of how to connect with Ecclesia, how to sign up for those courses. I promise you, it's like really good content. It's gonna help you. We all always need somebody to come alongside us. There's just so much you can do by yourself, right? You try the
Yep.
best you can, but sometimes you need someone to come alongside you on your journey to get in wholeness. That's what God wants for us to be 100% whole. Um,
Yeah.
so as we start to round up a little bit, let me say I have maybe one or two more questions as we round off.
Yeah.
What you said about religion is spiritualized perfection. I'm like, ooh, that kind of hit me a little bit. I was like, hey, let me give her a few minutes to kind of unpack that for us. What do you mean by religion is spiritualized perfection?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at religion, it has this element of you need to be perfect.
Mm,
And if you're not perfect, then you don't measure up.
mm,
And if you don't measure up, then you're X'd out, you know?
mm, mm,
And it's paralyzing,
mm,
to a lot
mhm,
of people. Some people, like me, for a long time, I was living up to it, reading all the Bible verses and going to all the church services and
mm.
trying to earn my badge of Christianity. You
Mm,
know what I mean?
mhm, mhm,
Um, and so if I were to describe to you perfectionism, it's the same thing.
Mm,
It's just the world's version of it.
mm,
And so yeah, that's been it. And I found what breaks my heart is so many believers are struggling with religion.
mm,
So many of us. And so it's my heart. Breaking Perfect was birthed out of this desire to see perfectionists transformed and healed and able to connect with humanity while
mm,
also connecting with their divinity, if that makes sense, the calling that God has put on their lives at the
mm,
same time.
mm,
And I think this is why Christians are so judgmental. You
mm,
know, all perfectionists are highly judgmental.
mm,
And it's because you have this high standard of self that you always are. If you're meeting it, and because you're meeting it, anyone who's not then receives judgment.
mm,
In the moment you're not meeting it, you turn the judgment on yourself. And
mm.
so I could go on and on about that, but yeah.
So good, so good. My cousin was
Yeah.
asking, what is religion, or what are we referring to as religion?
Yes.
That's, everybody has different definitions of what religion is. There is religion, obviously, which is traditions, whether you are Christian or um, Muslim or Buddhist, whatever. You have certain traditions, certain beliefs. This is how we believe. This is who we follow. There is that religion, but there is also religion, which is kind of practices that kind of put you in this bondage. It's so strict. There is no wiggle room. You have to do things exactly this way,
Mm-hmm.
or nothing's going to work out for you. So
Mm-hmm.
things like reading the Bible, praying, fasting, preaching the gospel, those are very important spiritual practices that do help us grow.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we prioritize that above our relationship with the Lord, which is
Mm-hmm.
actually where life flows from, when we are connected to Him and we relate with Him, it makes it easier to do all the spiritual practices that help
Right.
us grow. That's what I think. So hopefully that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um anyway, so my final question before we close would be shame, the power of shame. I find that sometimes everything we've talked about now, disappointment, negative thinking, overwhelmed, anxiety, can lead people down this path of feeling ashamed, either because they think, oh, it's my fault, things are not working out. Maybe if
Mm-hmm.
I had worked harder, or people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts and kind of feel this sense of shame of, I can't tell anybody that I'm struggling or that I'm
Yeah.
traumatized because whatever. How do you break out of, what are some practical tips to break out of shame so you can
Mm.
get freedom?
Yeah, that's really good. Hmm. For one, I hate shame. Um, uh, yeah. So for me, shame, what helps me to define shame is humiliation.
Hmm.
So I'm humiliated. That helps me because shame can often feel like, what is that? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I feel humiliated, it's important for me to talk to someone
Mm,
that's safe, that
mm,
you can trust,
mm,
and I can tell them my humiliation.
mm,
Like, actually, this happened, and then I can ask them if they're safe. Like, you have to be careful because if it's someone who's shameful themselves, then they'll
mm.
shame you even further. So we
Wow.
we want to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I need to remember that I am not what I did.
Mm,
You know,
mm-hmm.
or if I failed or whatever I did, I am not that. I just had a moment of I made a poor choice and
Mm,
I'm human. Humans make poor choices.
mm,
You and I here, we've made poor choices before.
mm-hmm.
If you're listening to my voice, I'm sure you've made poor choices as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another piece is connecting to the humanity of shame.
Mm,
Like, actually, I'm not the only one, because
Mm.
shame can also can make you feel isolated. And
Mhm.
often what shame does is it makes you go underground. You know,
Mm. Mhm.
you decide you're never telling anyone, or you're never gonna let that out because no one can know, because if they knew, then they would never want to be around me. And it's like, actually, anyone who knows what it is to be human
Mm.
knows that any human could do anything at any time.
Mm.
And if that be true, I have no room. For me, I'm like, you can tell me pretty much anything. And I'd be like, it may be surprising to me, or like, man, I've never heard of a human do that, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
But I will not shame you for the simple fact that you're human,
Mm.
for the simple fact that although there's deity inside of you, there's also humanity.
Mm.
And so oftentimes I think what cultivates shame in culture is this lie that humans are to be superhuman,
Mm.
meaning morally superb. And the truth is, I think about David in the Bible, adultering liar.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That was what he did.
Mm.
But who he was the man after God's own heart.
Mm.
So, that would blow up the church today. Like, that would literally blow up the church,
Mm.
because we're so uncomfortable with mess up.
Mm.
But God isn't. And
Wow.
I mean, when I look in the Bible, I can look throughout, he's not uncomfortable with it,
Mm.
from the Old to the New Testament. And so we have to as believers, begin to kind of reverse the culture that we've created around
Mm.
mess up,
Mm.
where people have to hide because they know they could be more humiliated for talking about their humiliation,
Mm.
for sharing their humiliation.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. There's consequences for everything we do.
Mm.
Everything we do, whether good or bad. The Bible says you reap what you sow. That's a fact.
Mm. Mhm.
Can't change that.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean I have to humiliate you for it, if that
Mm.
makes sense. So,
Mhm.
yeah, undoing shame, I think practically, step one, get it in the light. I always say,
Mm.
you want to live in the light. You want to find the light wherever
Mm.
that is.
Mhm.
If you have a friend, or oftentimes the light can start from within.
Mm.
That shame, what if you decided, you know what? I'm human. I
Mm.
made a mistake. I think someone will understand that.
Mm.
And then from
So
there,
good.
you go into dealing with the consequences depending on what it was. Sometimes we're ashamed for, I got on stage and I flubbed,
Mm.
you know,
Mhm.
that's a shameful thing. It's like,
Mhm.
well, just talk about that. You'll be fine.
Mm.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But
Mhm.
if you are ashamed because you're watching porn, or you had sex outside of marriage, or all of these different things, these are things that have consequences that you're
Mhm.
going to then have to have the courage to deal with the repercussions of what you've
Mm.
done.
Mm.
You're still not what you did. I think of David again. He was not what he did. He was
Mm.
not. He was not an adulterer, murderer. He was the
Mm.
man after God's own heart. But he had committed adultery, and he
Mm.
had murdered a man to cover it up. If
Mm.
that makes sense.
So good. So good. I mean, it's
Mhm.
it's a complex topic. I wish we had enough time to jump into that. There's like two sides of that coin. We've talked about one side. I mean, she definitely broke open that there is consequences. At the same time, there is the importance of bringing it to the light. And how we do that practically, it's a long conversation that we don't have time for
For
today. But the
sure.
key is, if you are dealing with shame, whatever that shame is, find a safe space and talk to somebody who is
Absolutely.
safe about what you're dealing with, so that you can get freedom. The enemy always hides in darkness.
Yep.
And but once you expose him, that's the beginning of freedom. This is so cool,
So
so
good.
good. Ecclesia, you've been awesome today. Hey guys, click the like button, subscribe, check out Aclesia's profile, check out our courses. She has some incredible resources that help people with mindset, with breaking shame, perfectionism. She's a mindset coach and she's really brilliant at what she does. So hey, go check her out on Instagram. Make sure to follow her. And if you're watching this live, thank you so much for joining us live. Thank you, Gracious Greatness, my cousin, for joining us. Thank you, MA. She said this is so profound. I agree with you. And my cousin Gracious Greatness said, lovely answers, Aclesia Miller. Thanks. And that is
Oh, amazing.
so true. And um next time we're gonna have another amazing conversation. I want to thank you for joining us live, and I will talk to you all soon. Peace.